What's up, everyone? This is Teddy checking in again. Last time I did one of these podcasts or IG sessions, I had mentioned that I'm not going to pay attention to politics. The best thing to do is kind of focus on self. And a lot of people that know me will realize how much of an astounding statement that is because for close to 2 decades, I've been very involved in politics in one shape or the other. But given what's taken place in these crazy elections cycle that we're in. Just because I said don't focus on the elections or don't focus on politics and focus more on self and what we could do to affect change where we live, I'm also not going to be like naive about these things. I still follow the elections and I see what's kind of taking place, and so I wanted to take this occasion to kind of articulate a message about how these two political parties, both Democrats and Republicans, continue ad nauseum and in a way that is almost nauseating to play us for suckers, and sadly, too many of us fall for it. And let me say from the outset, I only arrived at this conclusion fairly recently. For long stretches of my life, I saw myself as a very reliable Democrat. Was big time into the Obama campaign. Traveled to over 20 states on his behalf, volunteering for the campaign. But all that being said, it didn't take me, it didn't take until I went through a lot of hardship for my eyes to open up to exactly how the system, our political system is meant not to advance justice, but to bake in the status quo and to keep injustice in place. And how this is done is very diabolical. It's the America, the way that they keep us at each other's throats is by convincing us and conditioning us to view other people who are going through the same struggles as our foes. And so let me kind of take a step back for a second and convey another example that might kind of serve as a precursor of exactly what I mean. I'm originally from Ethiopia. So for a long time, Ethiopia was not colonized. We didn't bow before imperialists because we are united as a country for the most part. We had our struggles and difficulties. But when the times came in the late 1800s, we were able to defeat them. They came again, and again, we repelled them. And there was a statement that was made. I forgot exactly who it was. They basically said the conclusion was we can't defeat them in battle. We had to defeat them by turning them against each other. And so for decades, there's been a very underhanded, malicious attempts, through successive administrations or regimes to do exactly that, to convince and condition Ethiopians that who they are, what supersedes nationality and our common identity as human beings is ethnicity and our differences. And it took, 40 years later, here we are. The whole country is falling apart. You have Amaras versus Tigrays, and Tigrays versus Amaras, and Oromos versus, there's 66 the 66 tribes. And now there's, the major ones are essentially at each other's throats, and the country's falling apart. Now, I've been kind of inveighing against this for a while, but then recently I realized it's the same, and this is the same playbook, by the way, that's been weaponized throughout Africa to pit people against each other. In fact, I wrote a paper about this when I was in college about how Rwanda and South Africa, the playbook of colonization is to elevate one quote unquote special tribe, give them power and status, and then for the rest to give them grievances, to convince them that it's that one elevated tribe that's doing this to you. And so what happens then is that these outside entities, they funnel guns to the opposition, almost to the level of parity to the group that's in charge. Now, the group that's in charge, the ethnic group that's in charge, even though the vast majority of them are living meager means and struggling, because they have that quote unquote special status and they're elevated in that country, they're going to fight to maintain the status quo. They know they're hungry and they're struggling like the rest, but at least, hey, we are part of the elevated tribe. And then everyone else who's on the outside, they have all these anger and antipathy for the group that's in power. And again, guns funnel in to the outsiders, to the marginalized groups, all kinds of conditioning that it's the other ethnic group that's doing this to you, and what that creates is perpetual strife and warfare and civil unrest. And meanwhile, the colonizers, imperial, whatever you want to call them, are basically fleecing the country, taking all the resources, and the group that's in charge, the government that's in charge, is willing to give up all these, all the resources, sign up for exorbitant interest rate loans because they want to maintain power above everything else. Forget about the well-being of the country, the well-being of the people. They want to maintain power. And that's how Africa has become a continent full of resources, unlike any other, is impoverished. Not because of lack, but because lack of resources, lack of leadership, and lack of understanding how this game is played, and people being conditioned to fight one another instead of realizing that there's a common, a common struggle, and a common source of their struggle. Now, what I didn't realize is that the same thing is happening here in America, except the tribes here are black versus white, man versus woman, gay versus straight, believer versus non-believer, and on and on and on. It's a caste system of various classes of people, endless numbers of identities, and both political parties are then being paid handsomely to do the same thing, to say, hey, that the other group is doing this to you. You know, the way that you have the elevated group, and for example, in Rwanda or in South Africa, where was one ethnic group or the other, here the elevated group are white people. But again, most white people are struggling too. 80-90% are living either paycheck to paycheck, or they're living lives of economic anxieties, just like the rest of us. But again, most are like, well, you know what? At least I have the special status, and they'd rather fight for the status quo, right? And you have Republicans. That's why, or even like alluding to what the status quo used to be, like wanting what used to be, even though what used to be would never really work for them too. Right? So you have people like Trump and these ultra MAGA who come and play on these grievances that white folks have, right? And then they convince them it's black folks doing this to you, it's Latinos doing this to you, it's Muslims doing it to you. So that's how Republicans play identity politics. But guess what? Democrats do the same thing. They go to black folks, they go to Latinos, and they say it's white people doing this to you, right? And the malicious aspect of this, and how evil but yet cunning it is of this ploy, is that you, by focusing on what makes us different, by focusing on when Democrats go around saying, instead of saying economic injustice, they say black poverty instead of saying poverty. Instead of saying, women inequality overall, they say women inequality. Don't think for a second that they're doing this because they care about you. They're doing this because this is how they sectionalize and slice and dice America, so that they can focus, that we can focus on our differences, instead of realizing that almost everyone across the board is being pillaged by a system that squeezes the middle class, the working class, the poor, even the upper middle class, and transfers wealth upward, and then transfers inequality and hardships downward. And imagine, if you will, you have a meat grinder. Some folks are at the top of the meat grinder, others in the middle, and then others have already been ground to dust. And instead of focusing on the fact that we all are headed towards the same conclusion, which is poverty and hardship, if we don't turn this the ship around eventually. No. We'd rather focus on what I'm going through instead of what we're going through. And this is how the playbook works. And again, what Republicans are very good at, adept at, the grievance politics to poor whites, or quote unquote. I hate these labels to begin with. These labels were race is a byproduct. Racism cannot exist outside of race. You know what I'm saying? Race was created by racists. Labels such as black and white were created by racists. And they are meant as a caste system. When you see yourself first as a race and not as a human being, you buying into this concept that your identity as a race is more important than your common identity as a human being. This is exactly the same thing that's going on in Ethiopia, where people are buying into this concept of this false notion that ethnicity supersedes humanity. And when you do that, you essentially you're empowering people that are demagogues to go through and pit people against each other and make it impossible for change to ever take place. You know, for me, one of my biggest political, or not political, just heroes in historical terms, for a long time was Malcolm X. You know, I used to love his fiery rhetoric and when he's going around saying white devil this, white devil that. You know, there was a time in my life when I used to blame white people for a lot of things. It wasn't until I went through hardship. In 2015, I lost my job, lost my a lot of things happened. I became homeless for almost a year and a half. And it was that experience that taught me that at the end of the day, when it comes to inequalities and injustice, there's a common struggle. You know, I used to blame all the ills of the world at the feet of, lay the blame of all the social ills of the world at the feet of white people. Until I saw, when I was in shelter after shelter, the vast majority of people were white and struggling and poor. And that opened my eyes. And what I knew to be true but not really understood became that much more evident. When you have the vast majority of white people that are struggling. And the only way that we could create any type of movement towards justice is if we create a coalition that overcomes our differences. Right? Again, going back to my historical heroes, that's when I found out more and more about Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was one of the pillars of the Black Panther Party. But yet he realized at one point, and Black Panther Party, anyone that knows about the Black Panther Party, my God, astounding what they did. They were truly revolutionary, but not like in the gun aspect of it, but about self-sufficiency. Starting up soup kitchens, starting up education centers, schools, and clinics, and saying that we will lift ourselves up. And that's why the FBI targeted them. It's not because of their guns. It's because of their minds and their ability to say that we are going to stand up on our own, become self-sufficient. So Fred Hampton at a certain point realized that we white folks could not do it on what I want to say, being Ethiopian. I kind of tread carefully about co-opting African American history. I honor the differences in that way. I can never speak on the pains of African Americans, but he was like, well, black folks cannot overcome on their own. So he joined forces with this group. I forget the name exactly. It's like the Proud Boys version of the 1960s. This group used to advocate for white justice. By today's standards, they would be called white supremacists. They used to have Confederate flags, but yet he convinced them to join forces. So there's an iconic picture of the Black Panther Party on one side with their Black Panther Party flag, with the other side with the Confederate flag on the other side, saying that we have a common enemy and a common struggle. Now, anyone that tries to say that Black Panther Party are like some type of sellouts are either naive or just straight out idiots or liars. Black Panther Party was the most revolutionary group of them all. But yet, here they were sitting down to someone who in these days we're being taught and conditioned all the time to hate. Hate is not a solution. Hate is energy that prevents you from growing. And when it comes to justice, hate is what prevents from justice. It's an abortive method of justice. Because love is the only way that you can overcome evil. There's a reason why if you say, pronounce love backwards, it says evil. It's pronounced evil. Love it backwards is evil. So if you want to overcome evil, you do so through love, not through anger, not through lecturing people, not to pointing fingers and blaming. You know, we've entered into this very narcissistic age where it's me, me, me. The collective we is taken out of it. And that's what we've been conditioned all the time. And so that's what our politics is. It's a lie. Democrats, Republicans, and this world are both equally malicious and liars. When they go around, anyone that points to an injustice and they attach a race and a gender, a sexual preference in front of it, instead of telling the truth that there's a common struggle. Look, at the core of almost every social inequality is economic injustice. It's economic inequality. The whole thing is about economic in nature. It's like economic inequalities. You can't advance justice without addressing economic inequalities. But economic inequalities is happening across the board. It cuts across the social strata. And anyone that tries to convince you otherwise is not there to help you. They're being paid handsomely to lie to you, to deceive you. You know, why do you think corporations give billions of dollars to these political parties? Because they know that as long as we, the people, are being conditioned all the time to look through, to look at social advancement through the lens of our differences, through tribalism, we will never get anywhere, ever. And so it just, I used to be a political fiend. I used to just eat it up. I used to go around call myself a hardcore Democrat. I went to the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, and was in both in 2008 and 2012. I was there. I was in Denver, got into the Denver football stadium in 2008. Was in Charlotte at the convention 2012 as well. Man, I used to love it. Now I look at it, I'm sickened by it. Because it's a lie. It's a lie. And these politicians, on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, do you really, the irony is that the Republicans will look at Democrats and say, I can't believe they're falling for these politicians pretending to be for them. But yet they will fall for Trump. And vice versa. Democrats will look at Republicans and say, I can't believe that they think Trump cares about them. The truth is, none of them care about you. They don't. They use, I get, in a lot of ways, because I used to see myself as a Democrat for such a long time. In a lot of ways, I get pissed off more at Democrats because I realize how this game is being played. They go around, they use the pains of marginalized groups every 4 years. Every 4 years. And rage and rant and promise and say all kinds of things, rhetoric, up until the last vote is counted, November 4th or November 5th, and then boom, they forget about us. They don't, like Michael Jackson said, they don't really care about us. It's a lie. Kamala Harris had 4 years with Joe Biden to implement the very policies that she's talking about now. I'm astounded that she's talking like she just arrived on the scene today. Hope. What happened to Hope 4 years ago? What happened to these economic policies that were benefiting the few and while the rest of us were getting thrown under the bus? Again, go back to the economic and nature in terms of what the underlying cause of social injustice is. You have the wealth gap that has grown from a gap to a chasm. You have the vast majority of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, zero net savings. One paycheck away from utter disaster. And I know about this because that's what happened to me. A couple of missed paychecks. This is the economic reality of most of Americans. Cannot be monopolized by black folks, by white folks, by Latinos. This is happening to all of us. But because they're so slick and because they're so malicious in their lies, they will condition you or try to condition all of us to focus on, it's only happening to me. And as long as that happens, we can never understand that's happening to all of us. And as long as we cannot understand that's happening to all of us, we can't unite. And without unity, you have division, and then it leads to this, what we have. The status quo never changing. politicians promising every 4 years and nothing changing. So at what point are we going to wake up to the lies? Like for me, I became an independent. I ran as an independent 2 years ago. I will never vote Democrats, Republicans again. And people always tell me, yeah, but this election cycle, they become hyperbolic. This election cycle is too important. Every election cycle is too important. It was only 20 years ago that George Bush was seen as the Trump. And now the Democrats love him. I promise you this. 4, 6, 8 years from now, Trump will be embraced by Democrats the same way that Bush is being embraced by Democrats. Remember how much Bush was hated? It'll be the next bogeyman. And then the next election, oh, we can't vote for, we have no choice but to vote for one of them, the lesser of two evils. The lesser of two evils is two evils. It's still evil. So, I'm not saying don't vote, don't get involved, but empower people that are not attached to these two equally bankrupt political parties that are owned by oligarchs, by plutocrats, by the corporate state. You know what I'm saying? But above and beyond that too, look, change won't come from the top. Change will come where we live. So stop buying into this us versus them narrative. At the end of the day, the best way to advance justice is by listening to people as much as you want to be heard. And you can't convince people to join your side by pointing at them and lecturing them. But that's exactly what's going on now. Again, I go back, Malcolm X too. He was at one point, he was firebrand and full of very, fiery rhetoric. But when he went to Mecca, came back a changed man. He's like, you know what? I'm not against a white man anymore. I'm for anyone that's suffering. In that way, he kind of spoke against what he spoke about for such a long time. And he started speaking out for universal justice. And shortly thereafter, he was murdered. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, same way. As long as he was only talking about black issues, he was beloved by the establishment. And he started speaking about universal justice, bang. Fred Hampton. The way to change is to join hands with people that do not look like you, that do not think like you, and convince them that your struggle is intimately tied into their struggle. Otherwise, all this, lecturing and hateful rhetoric, anger. As much as you think you're advancing change, you're not. You're being played, and you're doing the job of the status quo. You are, the Russians used to call anyone that worked on behalf of the state without knowing it useful idiots. You become useful idiots when you go around leading with anger and pointing fingers and minimizing the suffering of other people. I was that too. Nobody wants to have their suffering minimized. And nobody can monopolize suffering in that way. So, your suffering would not be lessened because you acknowledge that somebody else is going through a struggle too. Actually, it makes it even more meaningful in that way. Justice and redress cannot be monopolized. If you try to do that, you become like crabs in a barrel. Nobody's going to get anywhere. So that's just my thought. So as you're watching these political speeches and you have one politician after the other talking about justice through the lens of division, they're not speaking out for you. They're demagogues and charlatans who are selling you snake oil. Snake oil. And they're trying to convince you that you're a victim. Every one of us in this life gets victimized, but you're not a victim. You stand up and you fight for what's yours. And you do so by also somehow reaching across the political and social divides. That is how you advance justice. All right, yo. It's been quite, I didn't realize I could talk for a while. I guess maybe I'll do this again at some point down the line. Have a blessed day, y'all, and we'll talk soon. Peace.